To this very special edition to Countdown to Signing Day. My name is Brandon Adams. This is Dog Nation's Jeff Sintel. And we are live tonight at the Marlow's Tavern in Dunwoody, and what a great time we've already had this evening. Getting a chance to talk to a lot of Georgia fans who have a lot of big questions about the state of the 2019 class for Georgia and how it's going to close out here as February approaches. I know many of the folks watching right now feel the very same way. So, Jeff Sintel, first of all, it's great to have you back from Orlando and San Antonio and the all-star travels you've been a part of over the course of the last few weeks. And I kind of designed tonight's show with a specific thing in mind, and I hope you're okay with this. I try to go as structure-free as possible, as loosey-goosey as we can, because I know that a lot of people got a lot of things they want to ask, so we're going to take a bunch of comments on Facebook and YouTube and literally just throw as much stuff out there over the course of the next few minutes as we could possibly do to make sure that people who haven't had a chance to hear from you in a while, you've been on the road here. You've been doing some serious work for Dog Nation. You've been in the recruiting bunker. But now you're out, and now you're back, and people want to know some stuff. So we're going to give people a chance, old school style, just to pepper you with questions here in our video comment section all night long. I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope it's as much fun for you as it is for the rest of us.
So we're going to go best available question, like best available player remaining in the 2019 class.
Jeff. I see what you're doing there. So while we're getting the questions lined up and ready to go, I will remind you, as I said, we're at the Marlow's Tavern tonight, and we have great events like this happening at taverns all across the great city of Atlanta and your neighborhood as well. And the best way for you to find out when something like this is coming to the Marlow's Tavern closest to you is by texting the word Marlow's. That's M-A-R-L-O-W-S. There's no apostrophe in that. Just M-A-R-L-O-W-S to 24242. And you can become a Marlow's Tavern Insider. And you can find out about great offers at the neighborhood tavern closest to you and great special events like the one we're doing right now, where we're going to be next. You can find that out when you become a Marlow's Tavern Insider. So please become a Marlow's Tavern Insider by texting Marlow's to 24242, and you can find out about some really cool stuff and some great offers from our friends at Marlow's Tavern.
Maybe this is the point in our show, in our loosey-goosey type show Brandon was talking about. Should we tell everybody out there in Facebook land what the folks at Marlow's Tavern learned about maybe 20 minutes ago about a new official visitor for Georgia this weekend?
You want to share that off the top of the show here? I'm certainly not standing in the way of you doing anything like that, by all means.
Well, newsmen are supposed to share news, so that's what I'm going to do here. Ryan FITZGERALD told me maybe about 20 minutes ago that he is going to take an official visit to Georgia this weekend. Now, Ryan FITZGERALD, who is that? These leaned-in recruitniks, I like to call them, will know that Ryan is a kicker out of Colquitt County. Lots of schools are on him. Georgia hasn't offered him yet, but they're giving him an official visit this weekend. Now Ryan has a mega leg. He has a leg that he had a 60-yard drop kick in high school football, hit a bunch of 55 to 59-yarders in his career, a great kickoff specialist. I know what everybody's going to think, Jeff. What in the world is Georgia in the kicking business when they got to get that Plumlee fella scholarship? They got Nestor to think about. They got Elam to think about. They got Pickens to think about. Just an official visit, folks. But maybe what that does is it prepares Georgia in case maybe some of their top targets go in another direction.
So newsman gives news, Blowhard spouts off hot takes. That's basically our two roles here as a part of our Countdown to Signing Day event, so we're glad you're part of that with us. Tony Burson gets us started on Facebook by saying, what about Nick Cross? Cross, a Florida State commit, a defensive back. Georgia, you mentioned Kyrie Lam. How does Nick Cross, as we head towards the end of this cycle in February, how does Cross fit into Georgia's plans?
Florida State commitment. He did not sign during the early period. He's going to keep his options open. Here's what's happening with Nick Cross. There was some good interest there with Georgia, and it was mutual. He took a secret visit or two, or at least tried to keep it secret. I think with Nick Cross, though, his large chunk of his interest was tethered to Mel Tucker, defensive coordinator, defensive backs coach, NFL resume. I think Georgia would have to see what it does with the new defensive coordinator, defensive backs coach hire in order to really start to maybe make another run at Nick Cross.
By the way, speaking of Florida State commits, whatever happened to Quayshawn Fuller? That's a name we used to talk about a good bit, a defensive lineman. We haven't talked about him in a while. Is Quayshawn Fuller, who I don't believe signed in December, is he still on the board at all?
No, it was funny. Quayshawn told me, I don't know, maybe a month ago that he's like, man, dude, I still really love Georgia. I'd still really love to take an official visit there, but Georgia just dropped off with its interest. Georgia's not recruiting him anymore. And that shows you a little bit about maybe defensive tackle, defensive ends, defensive line guys in the class of 2019. Bill Norton, Tamon Mitchell, Trayvon Walker. Zion Logue. Georgia is loaded up right there on the defensive line, and 2020 will be another heavy dollop of defensive tackles as well.
Jackie Mullins on Facebook. I'm telling you guys, we're going to try to go as fast as we can, get as many of these in, so please keep firing them away. Anything you want to do recruiting-wise. This is a fun night to do this here on Countdown to Signing Day. I've intentionally tried to design the show as structureless as possible so we can squeeze in as much as what you want to talk about. And Jackie Mullins brings up a name that I really want to talk about. Jackie asks about George Pickens. Auburn committed wide receiver, another one of these guys that does not sign in December. Georgia, obviously, as we're all well aware of now, does not get Jaden Hazelwood. Pickens is the next best available receiver. But now what seemingly should help Georgia with Pickens is that McCole Hardman's gone now. Riley Ridley's gone now. Those were Georgia's 2 top receivers a year ago, 2 wide receivers, now on their way to the NFL. It just stands to reason to me that ought to help Georgia with its pursuit of George Pickens, who is committed to Auburn but has also had a strong flirtation with LSU. What do you make of the situation with Pickens right now, Jeff?
I think Georgia is maybe 3rd or 4th with Pickens, and maybe this makes them 3rd with the matriculations that happen at the wide receiver spot. And really, it's not just McCole Hardman. It's not just Riley Ridley. There's also the loss of Terry Godwin and Jason Stanley and Akili Crumpton. That's a lot of Georgia's depth chart in terms of their receivers there. I know Georgia wants to get 8 guys ready to play for this next season, 8, 9 guys, because that's what they feel like their playing rotation needs to look like. I think George Pickens is going to give Georgia official. I think it's going to be wait-and-see mode there and see how well that works out. It's still committed to Auburn for a reason, though, and I would think that the most likely places for George Pickens to sign, that's why I said 3rd, I still think LSU might be in a better spot still than Georgia.
Johnny Whitehead says, with the guys that left, this is on YouTube, Johnny, thanks for commenting, do the scholarships tied to those juniors, is that available for this year's class or next year's class?
It's really just here's a few things, and I know this is going to be run counter to a quick and fast twitch type answer Q&A format. But the main things you got to think about with the NCAA is they get 85 scholarships underneath the mandate, student athletes for football. You can never have more than 85 guys signed at one time. Georgia, with all these early enrollees, look at this. There's currently, counting the guys that exhausted their eligibility, that includes grad transfer like Jay Hayes, they had 15 guys become available in terms of exhausted eligibility. They had 6 guys that have now left the program. There's 21 guys that left off the cap. There's currently 22 guys that are signed or committed to join Georgia. But all that matters is when they get to Georgia, Georgia has the room under the 85 to add those guys. I think Georgia was 1 scholarship under for the 2018 season, which meant they were right at 84. So you got to have further matriculation, player attrition, and everything else like that. And it's all. The other thing you got to think about is you can sign the max of 25 per year. There's really just no simple way to explain this, but you can do something called back count. And back count means if you only signed 22 guys in 2017 or 2018, then you can take 28 in 2019, and you can back count those guys, especially your early enrollees, to kind of fudge that math with 25 scholarships per year.
Joshua Stevens and Joseph Kennedy both want to talk about Brian Brzee, the top player in the country for the class of 2020. Guys, we'll do that in 1 second. Let me get Diedrich Frazier first, though, because I'm glad that he brought this up. Diedrich mentions Jerry and Ely, the 4-star running back that decommitted from Ole Miss. This is a top 7 or 8 back in the country here, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, and he is decommitted. He's back on the market. He's going to sign with somebody in February. And Ely's not a guy that I know a ton about. I haven't followed his career all that closely, so I don't know what him being on the open market necessarily means. But when you see the numbers of what Ely's bringing to the table, that gets your attention a little bit. Any reason why the ripples of Ely's decommit from Ole Miss, who, by the way, before the decommit there, Ole Miss was looking at a pretty good recruiting class. Losing Ely hurts them a little bit there in that regard. Any reason to think that those ripples we felt in Athens, Georgia? Georgia only signed one running back after all.
Yeah, I think what's happening there with Ely is he's getting the feels for Clemson. Clemson was a school that was kind of doing more than keeping his recruiting warm. I think that's what Georgia's recruiting of Ely could best be described as, is Georgia was just staying in contact just enough to stay in the radar a little bit, to stay in the periphery of his decision. Quick back, fast back. And here's where I break your heart, Brandon. Even if I was going to say, oh, yeah, watch Georgia there. They're going to make a late run, Dell McGee, yada, yada, yada. That young man is a terrific baseball prospect, and I think in the long game for him, he's going to end up playing pro baseball.
Well, my opinion on this might surprise you a little bit. If Georgia can't sign John Emery Jr. and if it can't sign Trey Sanders, I'm not sure I wanted Georgia to sign another running back because I want to be in the mix or see Georgia be in the mix for Zachary Evans and Kendall Milton, who you had a great piece once again at DogNation.com with this week. I don't want to block an Evans or a Milton from wanting to come here. I don't, with all due respect, I don't mean this in any way critical. I don't want a body on this roster just so you can say you can have X number of running backs. If it's not going to be a Sanders or an Emery level player, then I'd rather sort of, cast my lot in 2020 with what a Kendall Milton from California has a chance to be or what a Zachary Evans from Texas has a chance to be.
Yeah, those two guys are talking about being another Gershel, about being another Chubb and Sony or a Cook and Zeus as well. And this is what I equated to in that story. Every five-star running back that Georgia misses out on in any given class, and you can call that John Emery Jr. now, you can call that Trey Sanders now, really increases the odds a lot for them to get a five-star in the next class, the way Georgia's producing and the way Georgia's churning out running backs. Kendall Milton is a guy that I think Georgia might have a better shot there than most people think, especially I thought it was noteworthy for me to include in that story that we're talking about a 2020 junior running back right now who says basically every day via text or call or FaceTime, he's talking to both Dell McGee and Kirby Smart already. And, folks, that's how you prioritize a prospect. All the way out there in Fresno area, out there in Clovis, California, to cross the country to come play for Georgia.
I want to go get some more Facebook comments here in a moment. Tram Dickerson also asked about 2020 quarterbacks. I guess there's been a little bit of movement as of late with Robbie Ashford. I know that there was the one CJ guy whose last name is more difficult to pronounce than Tungo Vailoa. I know
DJ.
Say it again?
That's DJ.
Yeah, sorry. That's a name. I don't know. He may not need to come to Georgia because I'm not sure I'll ever know how to pronounce it. He's probably leaning towards Clemson anyway. But nonetheless, 2020 quarterbacks, what is the latest on that? Because despite the fact that Georgia signed a small militia worth of quarterbacks so far for the 2019 class, the need of getting another potential starter for the 2020 class, I think, has certainly grown as of late.
So here's the thing. If you're up into the Dog Nation forum, you learned maybe after the Auburn game that Robbie Ashford had a terrific visit to Georgia. Georgia loved on him. They made him feel the love. They made him feel like he was the guy in the class. Remember, Robbie Ashford is a guy that Georgia has been recruiting for the longest time, going back to before he was even a starter at Hoover High. He's feeling some type of way about Georgia. He told everyone at the Future 50 media event in Orlando last year. I think that was still last year. No, yeah, it was last year. No, it was January 1st. Anyway, Robbie Ashford is going to come down to Georgia and Auburn, home state Auburn, and he's also going to make his decision sometime in March.
Okay.
So he's making it move very fast. He doesn't want the distractions of his senior year to deal with that. And you got to look at Auburn. Now, Auburn pulled in Bo Nix, the nation's #1 quarterback, dual-threat prospect in 2019. I think Georgia's set up very well there with Robbie Ashford. He's going to play baseball, though, and here's where this gets complicated. The narrative
These kids with this baseball.
The narrative here about this is you're going to be like, Jeff, come on, can we not just get a dual-threat quarterback and not have any headaches and not have any late-term worries or anything else like that? Robbie Ashford, I've been told, is likely a top 200 baseball prospect as well.
So he's a real baseball prospect.
A real, not a faux baseball prospect where some people like to rep up to make people think.
Be careful.
What I'm going to say there is that Robbie Ashford is the type of guy, might choose Georgia or Auburn. Everyone might feel great about it. He'd have a great senior year. Maybe be the #1 or #2 dual-threat quarterback in the country. And all the Georgia fans will think, oh, well, that's why Georgia didn't go all in on Harrison Bailey or go all in on Max Johnson, yada, yada, yada. But then he might go play pro baseball.
Yeah, so that's certainly something to pay attention to. Also, back over in the YouTube comment section, one more quickly. Is it ukulele? Is that truly how you say it? James Buckner asked him, DJ. I'm telling you, that's a tough last name to pronounce. He's probably not coming to Georgia anyway, though, right?
He made a top 6 or top 7. Georgia's in there. You got to look for him. He's been making those googly eyes at Clemson and also Alabama for the longest time. And googly eyes is the best way to say like the guy might be leaning.
I want to get some Facebook comments here as well. That's Jeff Sintel. I'm Brandon Adams. We're having a great time tonight on our countdown to signing day event. We're live here at the Marlow's Tavern in Dunwoody. It's so great to see so many people coming out to say hello to us tonight. We certainly appreciate that. Appreciate you all being here. And if you've never had a chance to be one of our Marlow's events, we'd love to have you join us for one One of the best ways to find out when things like this are happening at the tavern in your neighborhood is becoming a Marlow's insider. Text the word Marlow's to the number 24242. It's MARLOWS to 24242, and you can find out about great offers and special events taking place at the tavern right there in your neighborhood. We appreciate you being with us tonight. If you can't be with us in the Atlanta area for one of our Marlow's events on all the Dog Nation video channels, and I think so far we're having a pretty good time getting a lot of these recruiting questions answered, so we appreciate you continuing to kind of fly in on that kind of stuff. Over here on Facebook, we had a few more comments. Let me get some Facebook stuff going here. Chad Buchanan asking about Kyer Elam. That's another one of those defensive backs. We talked, someone asked about Nick Cross earlier. Cross, a Florida State commit. Elam, not a commit anywhere, but a guy that has strong ties to Florida and seemingly a pretty good relationship with the Gators down there. How realistic is the situation for Kyer Elam? I know that's a guy you've spent some time with lately.
So Kyer is going to, unless he had a quick change midweek here, is going to take his official visit to Georgia this weekend. Florida and Georgia both wanted him to take. They wanted to get that first official visit out of the dead period. It looks like Kyer is still going to go with Georgia on that. Now, Kyer was heavily recruited, let me say, by Lewis Seen down at the Under Armour All-American game. Their lockers were next to one another. Kyer, I think, everything that I'm hearing and I'm interpreting and I'm processing, sounds like it's going to be Florida or Georgia. I think Georgia's chances are much better with Kyer Elam than the aforementioned Nick Cross that we brought up earlier in the show. But I do think it's probably going to be a Georgia-Florida battle. And I think, again, it's going to hinge on Georgia announcing their DB coach, their defensive coordinator. I think that's the final straw people are looking for.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because you had reported at one point in time that Mel Tucker was incredibly close with Kyer Elam. That's always a tough blow for a young man like that when a coach that he thinks he has a chance to play for he's not, there with anymore. How has Georgia done in terms of making up that ground? As of right now, there is no defensive backs coach in place. There's no defensive coordinator in place. Now, we also, I think, have an idea that Georgia's going to make pretty good hires in both those regards. There are a number of candidates, both in-house and outside the program, that could fill, DC void, D-backs coach void here. But in terms of making up ground with Tucker not there, how has Georgia done with that thus far?
I just think Tucker was a great personality. The kids resonated with him. He had the Alabama experience. He had the NFL experience as a coordinator in the league. And I think that just checked a lot of boxes for people.
He's also like a really nice guy.
Very nice guy.
There are a lot of these Georgia coaches, they're sort of foaming at the mouth. Like, Mel Tucker's not really that guy. He's like the gentlemanly, you've got to have a good cop. And Tucker, obviously I'm not at practice every day. I'm talking about behind closed doors. I don't really know what's happening once the media cameras go away. But Tucker seemed to be a pretty good cop for the Georgia defense.
I would say it's safe to say that Mel Tucker was not the Georgia coach that yelled the most at practices.
That's kind of my point, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I'm picking up what you're putting down right there. And I think really and I'm going to share a story about Tyreek Stevenson. Georgia knew this was coming with Coach Tucker. They knew he was going to move on, and
he deserves it. He's earned it.
It's kind of perfecting the profession, move on. I think whoever becomes the next defensive coordinator at Georgia has a 2-year track, maybe at the most, where they're going to align themselves to be a head coach in major college football as well. It's just a launching point now, the Georgia defensive coordinator job. And here's what they did with Tyreek, the dream chaser Stevenson, is they let him know way early, and it made him feel prioritized. It made him feel, we value you. We don't want you to be bum rushed by any news. And Kirby Smart kind of took over that recruiting maybe way in advance when he knew things were going to be happening with Coach Tucker. And that was one of the bigger reasons why Tyreek Stevenson remained to Georgia, is because of that in-depth, quick, constant communication in advance of the move. And I think that's the sort of thing they need to do with Kyer Elam as well.
Philip Jordan Wells asked about R.J. Henderson. We talked about George Pickens, another receiver, earlier. Henderson's a guy that, for those of us that watched the Under Armour All-American game, we saw him commit to Florida. Now, y'all know I don't like Florida, so this is going to come across like a bias. Whoever booked that segment needs to apologize to somebody. I'd never seen somebody that seemed less comfortable with his decision than R.J. Henderson was the night that he picked Florida. And listen, R.J. should go where he wants to go. Ultimately, I don't care. I guess there's still a chance he visits Georgia here, but that certainly seemed to be a young man pushed into a decision there that night.
Do you feel like this was Landon Collins' mom level of disappointment?
Certainly a little bit. I mean, this was a guy who's like, I guess I'm going to go to Florida here. I joked with you about this before. he looked about as happy picking Florida as I would had I picked Florida. That's about how happy he looked there in that regard.
That's a pretty good thing, and that'd be a great impersonation. He was channeling his inner Brandon Adams about going to Florida.
Is George involved here?
It's one of those things where I think he needs to take a visit. I don't know if Georgia's needs at wide receiver are going to intersect with him right there as well. I mean, he's a guy that might make 4 or 5 decisions in terms of his recruiting because in all seriousness, I don't think he's going to Florida. I think he's maybe on the third quarter of his recruiting process right now. Still got a lot of snaps left in that one. Remember, at one time he was committed to Oklahoma as well in the class of 2019, and I think Oklahoma made out pretty okay with their receiver crop.
Lottie Lauderdale says any super secret silent commitments. There are a couple surprises last year. A lot of that was December-based. Any big surprise, super secret stuff coming here?
Super secret is I would maybe think about a different class than the 2019 class. Georgia has more inroads made with pretty big guys in the 2020 class rather than vestiges of the 2019 class. Let's face it, everybody saw the picture that Kirby Smart tweeted out last night. He had 13 of his 14 early enrollees there around the pool table. I had some, scattered family members as well. That's a pretty big future cast right there, a pretty good window into the future for Georgia football. When you think about, remember, Georgia is vacating 15 seniors from the program, and they're already welcoming in 14 early enrollees to get bigger, faster, stronger, learn the scheme, adjust to college life. I just keep thinking, what's happened here with Georgia, I think has kind of let the air out of the balloon at some positions where it's not just stretched so tight with pressure and am I going to get reps? Am I going to play? I'm good enough to play. Why am I not playing? I think some of these things are going to allow some of Georgia's more younger players to get on the field and maybe reduce a little bit of the stress about everybody hoping to play more for the University of Georgia when they have all the talent in the world to do so.
Justin Ross in our Facebook comment section also asked about Zamir White, and do I have any inside news on that? I talked about this on Dog Nation Daily today. Obviously, White tweeted what he tweeted on Saturday about his excitement about coming back. I think sometimes some of the things that Kirby Smart says when he doesn't necessarily mean to say them are some of the things ends up being the most telling. And, Jeff, what I did on Dog Nation Daily today was I played a short piece of audio of Smart back in the spring talking about Devon Wilson shortly after he'd gotten hurt, saying that he was still hopeful that Wilson might be able to play some in his freshman season after, tearing up his leg during spring practice. And what Kirby Smart said there kind of off the cuff is, hey, if he recovers as fast as Zamir White is, then maybe there's a chance that Devon Wilson can play. At the time, Kirby had been mostly more careful than that when he talked about White publicly because this was when White was still recovering from his first ACL injury going back to his senior season of high school. My point in all of this is that I think we already have a track record of Zamir White proving himself to be one of these really aggressive guys when it comes to an injury recovery. Now you say, well, this is a second ACL. I will say, yeah, but it's a different knee. Now, I'm not telling you it's a good thing to have torn ACLs in both knees and within the last year and a half. I'm not telling you that's a good thing. But in terms of the recovery deal, the fact that he's, recovering, from one, now recovering from the other, I mean, I think I've still got a pretty hopeful tone when it comes to what Zamir White's going to be able to do for Georgia. And I love seeing what he tweeted. I think it came at a perfect time for Georgia fans who could have used some good news this weekend. So, you know what? My tone on Zamir White's going to be pretty hopeful here.
Dr. Adams, I would concur with you on that assessment, Dr. Adams. Not just for the emotional heart tugs you have right there.
I am not a doctor, but I play one on streaming video.
He plays one on Dog Nation Daily. I'm going to say this. I think it would be very hard for any member of the 2019 class to make as big of an impact as I feel Zamir White at 90% can make on the 2019 season. I think he is just that special of an athlete. I think he's one of those guys that's just gifted from the heavens, and I'm not talking about Zeus and Olympus and anything like that. Some people have very little scar tissue once they have this injury. And again, Zamir White's injuries, neither one of those were the type that Nick Chubb suffered, where you tear PCLs and patella tendons and everything else like that. I feel, and according to the information that I had, that Zamir White probably could have played a game on August the 1st last year if Georgia was playing games on August the 1st. He was that far ahead in his rehab and ready to go. And I think when Georgia needs Zamir White, I think he's going to be ready in the 2019 season.
Kebo Weir in the comment section, who, by the way, is with us tonight. Good to have Kebo Weir here live in the building in Dunwoody. One of our great Facebook commenters says she can't wait to see Zamir White back on the field for Georgia. I know a lot of people feel the same way. Here's what I'll tell you to set your clock to.
Set your clock.
We're probably about 6 weeks away from one of these kung fu videos coming out, or like I don't know what you call it, like martial arts videos.
Hitting the heavy bag.
Yeah, we're going to see him doing the kicks in the heavy bag here pretty soon. I mean, unfortunately, Georgia fans have a lot of experience now with elite running backs coming back from knee injuries. We've been through this now a few times, but I don't think we're too far away from seeing Zamir doing some of that stuff to let you know he is on his way.
Set your clocks moment. I'm going to say this is along the vein of this topic you were exploring a second ago. Think about D-Rob, Demetrius Robertson. Think about Devod Wilson, and then also think about Zamir White.
Yeah.
3 members of the 2018 team that were kind of parked for the 2018 season that I think I would not disagree with anybody that has the bold statements in them to pound the table and think that those will be 3 of the biggest new faces on the 2019 team.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Demetrius Robertson, I promise we'll get more comments here, but when you talk about Robertson, one of the things that came up in the room tonight is that, obviously when you look at some of the stuff that Justin Ross did last night in the national championship game, that is a good receiver, man. You just got to give credit where credit's due. That young man's a good receiver. Those one-handed catches are amazing. We know that Robertson can blow tops off of defenses with his speed. The one thing that he does need to show, and I know people get sort of cynical about the idea you got to be a blocking running back at Georgia. It's not just the ability to throw the block. It's also the ability to get off that press coverage or to do like Ross does, where he uses his body almost like a basketball player, where he can kind of turn, position himself. It's almost like he's posting up. You got to have a little bit of physicalness about you to be able to do that. So, this could have been a learning opportunity for Demetrius Robertson, who does have a year in his college career where he had nearly 800 yards receiving. Very different offense, very different conference. But this is a guy who's done it at the college level. We know he's got the physical specs here. It's just a matter of, does he want to do it at the SEC level? My guess is he probably does, and this could have been a very telling year for him. And I'm not writing off number 16 on the offense yet, not by a long shot.
Well, the things that people forget or maybe don't know about D-Rob is it's not like he was misevaluated. What he is he was coming off a medical red shirt. He was a little out of shape from maybe recovering and healing from his injury that cost him his sophomore year at Cal. But then he gets to Georgia and he has to acclimate. He has to get back in shape. But then when he was there were already 2 really good Bulldogs that basically did what he could do in the Georgia offense. That was Terry Godwin, and I don't know, maybe I saw on social media that maybe he didn't play as much as he probably hoped to or needed to finish out his career at Georgia. And then you had a guy like Nicole Hardman the same way. They basically did the same things, but they'd been healthy the year before. They'd been in the Georgia strength program. They knew their playbooks. I think D-Rob sets up. We were talking about this a lot lately. Georgia's receiver core, who are the new faces. I think a guy like Jeremiah Holloman has all the talent in the world to be the number 1 receiver, along with a guy like Tyler Simmons. Is Tyler going to be the new slot guy? And then I think names that need to pop up into that conversation are Demetrius Robertson, Dominic Blaylock, Trey Blunt, guys like that. And then maybe that Matt Landers, Tommy Bush type guy where Georgia needs that 6'4" receiver to make plays down the field for Jake Fromm as well.
And by the way, somebody in the YouTube comment section, Tram Dickerson mentioned Tommy Bush. I know you weren't in New Orleans, you were in Orlando and San Antonio at the time, but leading into the Sugar Bowl, Kirby said some nice things about Tommy Bush and the work that he had done for Georgia and the scout team there leading in that game. So for Georgia fans who kind of wonder what happened to Bush this year, at least a lost year for him in terms of being on the field, Kirby really gave him a compliment for how he gave that Georgia defense a look similar to what Colin Johnson, little Jordan Humphrey brought to the table as Texas wide receivers going to that game in New Orleans.
And another name, one name I forgot when I was talking about those 2018 recoveries to potential 2019 impact players is the name Azeez Ojulari, who's also recovering from
on the field a lot and getting stats against Texas.
Getting big stats. And I will tell you what, Brandon, you're going to have a hard time next season trying to figure out what is the most loaded, and I mean like loaded, scattered, smothered, and covered position group at Georgia on the 2019 team. Might be offensive guard. It might be inside linebacker. Probably might be outside linebacker or cornerback going into the next season because Azeez Ojulari, Nolan Smith, Jermaine Johnson. You've also got guys like Adam Anderson and Brenton Cox already there as well.
Loaded group.
Walter Grant. I mean, those are tons of outside backers.
We are very late here. I know a lot of YouTube comments. Can we do these really rapid-fire style?
Rapid fire.
First of all, our buddy Nakia Hester, whose name I used to brutalize on the Facebook comment section, I've also apparently brutalized on the YouTube comment section as well. He's going by Brutal as his name over there on YouTube. Apologize for that, Nakia. John Adams asked about Justin Rogers. Is he a guard, offensive side of the ball, or defensive lineman at the college level?
Not a guard anymore. Doesn't want to play guard. He thinks he might be a defensive lineman. That's where Georgia loves him.
Is that right?
Or an offensive tackle. He said he might play offensive tackle if he has to play tackle on the offensive line. One of the things he told me in Orlando is he said Sam Pittman wants him for the offensive line. Kirby Smart wants him for the defensive line. Sam Pittman usually does no wrong, but the tug-of-war there is usually won by the head coach.
Cameron Merrill asked about Jim Chaney. Any updates there? Jeff, I don't know how comfortable you feel speaking about this, but based on what I can piece together here is what I'm confident saying I believe. I do believe Tennessee made contact with Chaney, and I believe now that Chaney's decided he wants to stay at Georgia.
I'm going to say this, and I'm not going to try and sound like I'm being way too political, but Jeremy Pruitt knows college football. He knows defenses. He knows offenses that are hard to stop. And I think any flirtation with Jim Chaney, whether it be real or imagined or just contract language out there in the world to get somebody a better deal or whatever, if Jeremy Pruitt is coming after Jim Chaney as desperately as he needs an offensive coordinator to make sure that the Jeremy Pruitt era at Tennessee goes to year 3, year 4, year 5, I think that's a huge compliment for Jim Chaney.
Hasheem Spikes and somebody else, Jeff Barnes, asking about Kearis Jackson. That's a guy whose size as a slot receiver I really like. I mean, what do you make of the next step for Kearis Jackson?
Physical football player, can do a lot of things for Georgia, will have no issues whatsoever blocking in the Georgia offense. A lot of people think about him as a stopgap running back. Maybe James Cook and Kearis Jackson kind of become the utility Swiss Army knives of the offense a little bit, where they do a little slot receiver, do a little running back, catch a lot of bubbles going forward, and also be elite special teams players.
We'll make this the last one. Who asked about it? Somebody said about Darnell Wright. Maybe it was James Buckner bringing up Darnell Wright. Darnell Wright, 5-star offensive lineman from West Virginia. This just ain't happening, is it?
I don't write about him a lot on the site for a reason. I'm not trying to get clicks. I'm just trying to make sure people kind of see what's really out there. Darnell Wright seems like he's going to go to Tennessee, and it seemed like that way for the longest time. Georgia might get an official. Other schools might get an official as well. He told me and maybe a couple other reporters in Orlando that he still needs to smell and figure out what the air smells like in Athens before he can really consider the school. So when you got a prospect who hasn't even been in Athens to smell and kind of see what those surroundings are like, you can't really think of him as a legitimate guy to eventually sign with Georgia.
Zach Johnson, Mark Cole, and we'll make this the very last one. This is on Facebook. But the defensive coordinator situation, I'm of the belief that Georgia doesn't really need a defensive coordinator right now because it can close at a 2019 signing class. I mean, Kyer Lom's not going to wait to find out who the Georgia defensive coordinator is, I don't necessarily think. I mean, Georgia has not been under a lot of pressure to get this done necessarily, but assuming it can't go out and get a big name like a Derek Ansley, and the longer this goes on, the more unlikely that seems, that's probably just going to hire from within, right?
Well, I don't know. The American Football College Association convention was happening this week in San Antonio, especially Monday and Tuesday. The Raiders just kind of closed out their season, so I think the window opened for maybe a pro coordinator hire, a position coach hire like that for really the meetings to take place under the right pretenses and everything else like that. Kyer Lom told me something where he's not going to wait until signing day to make his decision. He'll take his officials. He'll process all the information. He'll likely maybe make his commitment prior to signing day. He's not really big on I have to have a big event and let the world know where I'm going. I would be surprised if Georgia does not make the hire before 2 or 3 weeks now into January. I think they need to have DB coach, D coordinator in place, not just for the 2019 class, but remember, Georgia's going to do work on the 2020 class now a lot in January as well. And
it's how they let those guys know they really want it, by they recruiting them when the door is still open to the 2019 guys.
True.
That's a little bit of a coded signal of hey, here's how bad we want you. We're recruiting you before 2019 is even over.
Yeah, and you want to get them in, and you know some of these guys won't have a guy at their position left in the 2019 class on these official visit weekends. So it just makes sense to kind of read ahead and read a chapter or two ahead, to use a scholastic term, in the 2020 class.
Even beyond a guy like Derek Ansley, any sort of big name outside candidate you want to bring in, one of the things I think that potentially complicates that is you've got a lot of lower level Division I head coaching jobs that are open up right now. We just saw Cliff Kingsbury go from fired at Texas Tech to the head coach of the Cardinals. We're in kind of an unusual era for coaching movement here. I'm sure there's a lot of potential outside candidates that Georgia could be talking to at the convention or other places who might be holding out to see, can I get one of these low-level Division I jobs that comes open once a guy sort of bounces up to that next level? This coaching carousel is not even close to stopping spinning yet.
Yeah, it's really weird. You even saw the guy that used to be the quarterbacks coach in Atlanta, who spent some time with the Titans, that now takes a head coaching job as well. It seems like these things move very, very fast now.
One of the things that you might want to do, though, real quickly in here, and I promise we're going to wrap up here, is, with Jeff Collins taking the Temple job, that head coaching job is back open. A guy at one point in time they were interested in was a guy like Mike Elko at Texas A&M. Now, I'll be the last one to tell you that Elko is going to become the Temple head coach. I have no idea about that. But something like that could all of a sudden bring another big-time job, DC working for Jimbo Fisher. You could have a situation where right now there's X number of defensive coordinator jobs open. A week from now, there may be more than that.
The other thing you got to think about here, and I'll kind of align it back with the Georgia people's interest right here, is here's what you got to get with the defensive coordinator hire. Number one, you got to get a defensive coordinator, and you got to get a defensive backs coach. If you promote from within, you still have to find a defensive backs coach. Do you go co-defensive coordinator? Here's what I think happens. I think it's somebody with some familiarity with the Kirby Smart, Nick Saban style philosophy of defense. It's also a guy that will recruit his hind parts off as well.
It's not going to be Greg Schiano, in other words.
Yeah, something like that. So I just see a lot of those things happening for Georgia in terms of the defensive coordinator hire. And Tyreek Stevenson, I remember him telling me this, and this is the best way recruits will see it. They trust Kirby Smart to hire the best person he possibly can to coach the defensive backs and to coordinate the defense, because Kirby's a defensive guy. They know Kirby Smart will get one of the best candidates out on the market.
Incredible stuff from Jeff Sintel. Make sure you read a lot more from him at DogNation.com. Thanks so much for being with us. My name's Brandon Adams. Huge thanks to our crowd here for making all this so much fun. Big thanks to Marlow's as well. Marlow's Tavern here in Dunwoody, always one of the great locations to come out and visit. Tonight, no exception there in that regard. They've been a gracious host for us, like always. We've got a lot of these coming up, by the way, in the month of January. So stay close to the Dog Nation video channels and DogNation.com. We'll give you an update on where we're going to be next. You can also become a Marlow's insider by texting Marlow's to 24242, and you can find out even before we know about the big events taking place in the Marlow's Tavern right there in your neighborhood. So huge thanks for you for watching tonight. Big thanks to everyone in person with us here right now. Signing day is fast approaching. We're going to do our part to get you updated on everything happening with those final pieces. They fall into place for Georgia's 2019 class. I'll see you tomorrow morning for Dog Nation Daily. We'll also see you for Before the Hedge just tomorrow afternoon with more recruiting coverage. And again, very soon, at Marlow's Tavern very close to you. So check that out then. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for being with us, everybody.